What's going on, Bengals fans? Stone Shields on hand for another edition of Chatterbox Bengals. And coming up on today's show, we're going to be breaking down the top position battles for Cincinnati. Going to start with the starters, but of note, I really don't think there's too many starting jobs up for grabs here at this point. And then, of course, going to work our way throughout the rest of the depth chart a little bit as well, and also detail some more roster battles for Cincinnati before, of course, the roster gets down to 53 players. But before we get into that, I invite you guys to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. That's youtube.com/chatterboxsports, your one-stop shop for the best Cincinnati sports coverage right here at the channel. Hit that sub button if you haven't done so already. Reds back in action tonight, had the off day last night, and massive series against the Milwaukee Brewers. By the way, the best team in baseball, the Milwaukee Brewers, and certainly a team that the Reds have had their fair share of troubles with over the years. But impressive series victory over Philadelphia. Hunter Green, of course, phenomenal in the finale. You take that series, you get the day off, and you have an opportunity to test yourselves among the best of the best and the Milwaukee Brewers. Trace Fowler, Nick Kirby, of course, will have you covered in the ninth inning and beyond. And also some other exciting things up on the channel. Of course, we've got some Bengals videos up there. We had a cornerback depth chart that we broke down yesterday morning that went out. Also a nice Reds video up about the Reds potentially calling up Sal Stewart. Should that be done here at this point? Obviously, the Reds called up Chase Burns. Some people may have said that was a little bit early, but they're kind of trying to toe that line between building for the future and competing right now. So maybe Sal Stewart could be the next guy up. Also, last night, we had another 513 golf video that premiered, so make sure you check that out. Elliott Rearing and, of course, Trace Fowler have you covered on that front. So plenty of exciting stuff up on the channel. Don't miss out. Hit that sub button for me right now. All right, let's talk about some of these position battles for Cincinnati. And as I mentioned at the top, from a starting perspective, it doesn't really feel like there was a whole lot going on. Obviously, right guard is where we're going to start here on today's show. But as time continues to go on, and I've mentioned this on several videos here at the channel as well, kind of feels like that is less and less of a battle, and it feels like it is going to be Lucas Patrick's job. Of course, we had a video that went out a couple of days ago with Craig Sandlin kind of detailing the fights. I'll put quotes up there for that. Not really a full fight, but kind of a bit of a brawl, some pushing, some shoving. Thereafter, Shamar Stewart kind of stumbled into Joe Burrow, knocked him down. By the way, Stewart beat Lucas Patrick very badly on that rep, but we kind of talked about, the things that Ted Karras, TJ Slayton said after the fact. But regardless, hasn't been super clean for Lucas Patrick, and you're not going to be perfect along your offensive line. Certainly you have concern there with a rookie at the left guard spot in Dylan Fairchild, and a guy in Lucas Patrick who was kind of a journeyman, who's bounced around a little bit throughout his career and hasn't really ever been looked at as a guy that, okay, this is a shoe-in starter for a professional football team. So there's certainly some concern there, but it kind of feels like they're shifting the focus a little bit away from Cody Ford, kind of getting him back into that swing tackle mode. And besides Ford, it didn't even look like they really gave Cordell Volson an opportunity there, that right guard spot, kind of just keeping him at that left guard spot and having him back up Dylan Fairchild. If Volson's going to make this team, he's going to have to show a little bit at least of guard flexibility, right? Doesn't necessarily have to play center or tackle, but at least has to be able to show over that he can play right guard. Hasn't really shown that, at least to this point, and it feels like it is Lucas Patrick's job to lose at this point. I think for a lot of Bengals fans, that is concerning. Not exactly thrilled with that outcome, but doesn't even really feel like that is really a position battle for Cincinnati anymore at this point. Obviously, if there are injuries in any of the practices or preseason games, that certainly could change some things. But obviously, the rest of the starters there offensively kind of are worked out, right? Of course, you got 9 at the quarterback spot, Chase, Higgins, Yoshi as your wide receivers. You can, make the argument, is it Sample, is it Gesicki? If you're running the football, it's Sample. If you're throwing the football, it's going to be Gesicki, right? Now, you do have to be careful about just putting having Mike Gesicki kind of be a telltale sign of what you're going to do offensively, because seemingly every time he was on the field last year, Cincinnati was throwing the football. So you want to work him into some plays where you are running the football and he's out on the field just from a disguise standpoint. But those are your top 2 tight ends, right? Sample and Gesicki. Obviously, we know the rest of the offensive line, OBJ, Fairchild, Karras, and Amarius Mims, with Chase Brown, of course, your running back. So really, the right guard spot was the only one that was up for grabs, and as I mentioned, doesn't really feel like it is very much up for grabs anymore at this point. Now, we will talk a little bit about backup quarterback a little bit ridiculous that we have to, but we will mention it. Also do want to talk about tight end as a whole in a second, but let's get to another starting potential battle for Cincinnati. There's really only two spots defensively where you can look at and say it's a battle. And we did the full breakdown yesterday morning of the cornerback room. I think that third cornerback spot definitely very much up for grabs here at this point. CTB and Dax Hill, they're going to start. There are no two ways around that. I would imagine Hill's going to be at that nickel spot, but they do have some outside flexibility with him as well. CTB, he was dealing with some soreness earlier in camp. He did not play against Philadelphia, but apparently he had an incredible practice. What was that, on Tuesday? And apparently he's had won some reps over Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who obviously are the best of the best at their position in the National Football League. So I think that's got to be a little intriguing for Cincinnati, seeing that CTB make some of those plays. He's always had it in him, but sometimes what was going on up here, not always in the right spot, type of thing, and kind of missed assignments, right? It was a bit of a theme last year for CTB. We'll see if he can clean that up in Al Golden's scheme and be a little bit better. But that third cornerback spot, Turner, Josh Newton, it's tough to say. And I think when I'm thinking about the Monday night game against Washington, that's probably the thing that intrigues me the most. I wouldn't say it excites me the most because I don't think you feel great about either one of those guys, but one of those two is going to be a starter, either Josh Newton or DJ Turner the second. Neither one were very good in the preseason game against Philadelphia. Neither one obviously played a ton either, but I think overall throughout camp, Newton's been more consistent, which I think that's kind of a key buzzword, right, for Cincinnati. Look for those players to be as consistent as possible. So maybe you give the lean towards Josh Newton here at this point. But DJ Turner, before he suffered that fractured clavicle on Sunday night against the Chargers last year, he kind of was finally starting to play some good football. So maybe he can get back to that form. Who do you go with here at this point? I really don't have an opinion yet. It's kind of a coin flip for me. I think the staff at this point would go with Turner. But obviously, Newton started the first game against Philadelphia as well. But obviously, multiple guys were out, so that doesn't, mean anything necessarily. But really going to have a close eye on that on Monday night. And then after that game, I think we'll have more of a clear vision in terms of what to expect there at that starting spot. Now, beyond that, last really starting battle is your edge rusher. And obviously, that is all kind of hinging on what happens with Trey Hendrickson, right? Is he going to be out there for week one? It's kind of interesting because we're kind of at like a calm period with Trey Hendrickson, right? There hasn't been any crazy news that has leaked or come out or something that he has said recently. On that front, it's kind of been very quiet here at this point in regards to Trey Hendrickson, but I suspect in a matter of days we will have something. He'll say something, a report will be broken by a national guy or perhaps a local guy as well. But obviously the edge rusher spot is predicated upon whether or not he is out there or not. But let's just, for the sake of this exercise, assume he is going to be out there for week one, because that is my prediction. It has been this whole time, and I'm going to stick with that. I think Trey Hendrickson will be out there for week one, but who is opposite of him? Is it Myles Murphy? Is it Joseph Osai? Or is it Shamar Stewart? That's going to be very interesting. I'm interested to see if Stewart runs with the ones in Washington on Monday night. That's going to be very interesting. Obviously, it was Osai and Murphy for week one. If I were picking, I would lean Myles Murphy, but I think that's just because I want it to be Myles Murphy because he was a former first-round pick, right? And you really haven't gotten much out of Myles Murphy to this point. But I think the Bengals as a staff probably feel a little bit better with Joseph Osai. And regardless, if those two are your starters and you don't have Trey Hendrickson out there, you're in serious trouble. But I think at the end of the day, in a perfect world, we would all love for Shamar Stewart to kind of take that leap. But he is a rookie. Had the late start with the contract stuff, right? So who knows if he's going to be in a spot to be a starter in week one. Myles Murphy, by the way, missed practice a couple of days ago. He went down with an injury, and that obviously not a good sign. He went down with an injury last training camp that caused him to miss the first 4 weeks. I believe it was a knee sprain then. So that certainly is something to monitor. But who that starting edge guy will be opposite, hopefully, Trey Hendrickson, certainly the only other battle for Cincinnati really here at this point. So that cornerback 3 spot, your one edge rusher spot, and right guard, I guess technically still a battle, but as I mentioned, doesn't really feel like it is anymore at this point. Okay, do want to circle back a little bit to some other roster battles. We're not going to be doing a full 53-man roster projection, particularly in the trenches. Not going to spend a ton of time there. That will be a future video, but I do want to spend some time talking about tight end. Tight end has been a money position for Cincinnati ever since Joe Burrow has gotten here. And it's kind of been a plug-and-play spot, right? Multiple guys have came through this system with Burrow and have had success at that position. Mike Gesicki, obviously the latest guy to do just that. Obviously, you have C.J. Uzomah, Hayden Hurst, Irv Smith. That didn't exactly go well, but Uzomah and Hurst certainly had a ton of success with Joe Burrow. And I think a lot of us, myself included here, when the Bengals signed Noah Fant, in that moment, I was happy because he got better, and also my instant reaction was, okay, Tanner Hudson's time here in Cincinnati is done. But I'm going to be honest, I think I was wrong there, and I think a lot of us were wrong too if you had that same thought process. As each day goes on, feels like Cincinnati's going to keep 5 tight ends. That's just kind of my gut feeling at this point. Gesicki, Sample, Fant, obviously locks, and I think they're going to keep Cam Grandy as well. I think they feel really good about him. And then do you keep Tanner Hudson? I think at this point you do. Now, it's very interesting when you break down the Bengals tight end room because you got guys like Gesicki and Tanner Hudson who are kind of just pass catchers, right? Basically receivers that play the tight end spot. And then you have guys like Sample and Grandy who are pretty much exclusively blockers but don't do much in the pass game. And then you have Noah Fant, who you're kind of hoping can do a little bit of both. But Tanner Hudson, ever since they made that signing, he was turning heads at camp, and he also was turning heads in that first preseason game against Philadelphia. And he played with the first team, he played with the second team, he played with the third team, and his production level did not dip whatsoever. He caught a tutty from Burrow, he caught one from the third stringer Desmond Ridder as well. So as time goes on, I think Tanner Hudson might be making this football team for Cincinnati, something I certainly did not expect, but he has to continue to play well and play well in these preseason games as well. But my gut right now says Cincinnati is going to keep 5 tight ends, and that, of course, leaves Tanner McLachlan on the outside looking in. I really do not see an avenue in which he makes the roster for Cincinnati. Your 6th-round pick last year, they kind of kept him on the team. They didn't want to expose him to waivers. He didn't suit up much. I think 2 or 3 games maybe, didn't do anything. And didn't do much at all in the first preseason game against Philadelphia. So I think he's kind of gotten phased out. And that pick, late round pick, not that big of a deal, but that appears to be a miss here at this point for Cincinnati. Let's talk quarterback. I think it's a little bit ridiculous that we have to do this, but there are people out online in the fan base, media people, social media people, who think that Desmond Ridder can challenge Jake Browning for the backup spot. Just stop it. It's really my instant, just quick to the point reaction there. Just stop it. Look, I like Desmond Ridder as much as everybody else does, right? What he did in Clifton was incredible. Mature guy, led the team to lots of football wins on the football field. But as far as him challenging Jake Browning for the backup spot, I don't think that's going to happen, right? Browning, I don't think, even if he plays poorly the next 2 preseason games, you've seen it, right? He came in for Burrow a couple of years ago and was tremendous. And did everything you could possibly ask for a backup quarterback. There's no reason to create any drama there at that backup spot. Ridder, yeah, you had an opportunity to get better. He was an upgrade of what you had at that quarterback 3 spot with Logan Woodside. He got better in that regard. And I think really the Bengals are just trying to test out, like, okay, could he be a backup quarterback in the future if you lose Jake Browning in the future? But for the 2025 season, Browning's the backup. I think that's pretty obvious, but Ridder at times did look quality in that game against Philadelphia. All right, back to the defensive side of the ball real quick. Did that full video that went out yesterday kind of breaking down the cornerback spots, so not going to spend a ton of time there. I think Cincinnati really only going to keep 4 linebackers. That's what it feels like, and 3 of which obviously are new guys. You have Logan Wilson back. You got your 2 draft picks, Demetrius Knight Jr., who's going to start. I'm really fired up about that. Barrett Carter, of course, going to make the team, and I think Oren Burke's certainly going to make the team as well, which leaves Muma Jongmeta on the outside looking in. He, of course, was UDFA out of Wisconsin last year. That surprised a lot of people in training camp, and then ultimately he was able to make the football team. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that again this year. Hopefully he can clear waivers and be a part of the practice squad for Cincinnati, but I know he's kind of a fan favorite, really did great things on special teams. I think he's on the outside looking in. Same thing with Joe Giles Harris, who also played really well against Philadelphia in that first preseason game, but my gut tells me at this point they're going to keep 4 backers, and it's going to be Logan Wilson and 3 new guys there for Cincinnati. And lastly, before we get out of here, that safety spot, again, I think it's a position you take 4 guys. Geno Stone has had, the health stuff. He is not fully up to speed, so you're going to have an opportunity there for guys like Tyson Anderson, Dejon Anthony, Jalen Key, P.J. Jules, to potentially have a big game on Monday night if Stone does not play. I don't know what the status is of Geno Stone at this point, but Jordan Battle, he's a lock to be a starter. Can somebody like a Jalen Key or a PJ Jules challenge Dejon Anthony? Because Tyson Anderson's going to be a lock as far as making the roster, and so is Geno Stone. I think at this point he's definitely going to make the roster, but can somebody challenge Dejon Anthony? That is going to be a question. PJ Jules was a UDFA last year, practice squad guy last year. He's turned a lot of heads. He had a good game against Philadelphia, doing some good things at practice. Jalen Key, of course, spent some time playing at Alabama under Nick Saban, and of course, also at that spot you have Shaquan Loyal also at that safety spot. Don't expect him to do much as far as challenging for that spot. But two guys there, PJ Jules, Jalen Key, could they challenge Dejon Anthony for that second or that final, that fourth safety spot for Cincinnati? But there you have it, top position battles for the Bengals here as we get closer to Monday Night Football. Certainly going to be very exciting. Hope everybody has a tremendous weekend, and we will catch you with some more Bengals content next week when we start to break down exactly what to watch for on Monday night between the Commanders and the Cincinnati Bengals.